The following video contains spoilers for Persona 5. If you do not wish to see or listen to the spoilers, I will put timestamps for your convenience in the description. If you have anything to say about my opinion or the game, leave a comment and I'll most definitely read it and or respond. Do we have an understanding? Son of a bitch.
Persona 5 and its story can be best described as sublime.
It's sublime.
The story is beautiful, and it will probably leave you inspired and feeling a new sense of self-control. I mean, it should. The game is meant to be an emotional experience that stirs you up and is supposed to be a cathartic experience for the player. Upon my first playthrough, this wasn't really what it was for me. I didn't quite grasp it at the time. I was constantly playing the game with the mindset of just beating it and didn't care much for the story involved. Upon revisiting the game, I began to reevaluate myself through the characters, seeing some of them deal with things that I similarly dealt with. With An, it was how she wasn't able to stand up for herself, show others that she could think for herself. But with time, she learned to finally stand up and speak her mind. This is something I don't want to cover too in depth at the moment, but definitely later. The theme of freedom and breaking free from being a slave to corrupted adults in society is so apparent throughout it. The game, as described by the Wikipedia, discusses the hardships of modern-day 21st century society. Today we'll discuss the game in depth from its story to its characters, and describe the things about it that I love and why I feel like it's one of the best JRPGs of all time. The story of Persona 5 is a weird one to say the least. The game starts you off with a scene where you've just pulled off what you believe to be a heist gone wrong. Captured and beaten, you are asked your name and interrogated. This is what starts your adventure. Now we start to learn about your main character, the one you either named after yourself or after an anime character. I went with Hiro Nakamura, you know, the guy from that one ship. Anyways, you're a delinquent who transferred from his old school and was put on probation because he beat up some bald dude for wanting to punch some chick. As this is pretty important to the story, you'll be reliving and revisiting the scene, each time getting a clearer image of what happened in the face of the person you beat up. You're introduced to Sojiro Sakura, who has to take you in while you're on probation and make sure you don't fuck up, which he absolutely makes sure you understand. So it turns out around Japan there have been unknown and drastic changes in people, causing a bunch of accidents and problems. Clearly, with the anime cutscene it receives, this will be important to the story, maybe not now, but later on. Now we're introduced to not only the principal of Shujin and Kawakami, but we also get an introduction to Kamoshida. Kamoshida is our first enemy in this game, an asshole PE teacher who beats up his students, as well as some other things, but we'll talk about them later. You stumble upon a random castle where Shujin once stood with Ryoji Sakamoto, someone you just met. Upon entering the castle, you are captured and taken to a prison cell. In a moment of realization that you're both about to be killed, you unlock your true self, or your persona, to help you out. After gaining the assistance of Arson, you defeat the guards and lock Kamoshida in the cell. As you're finding a way out, you stumble upon Morgana. He knows more about the world you're currently in. It's a palace in what's called the Metaverse. Allow me to explain. A palace is a person's cognitive world, the version of the world around them. So to Kamoshida, he views the school as his castle, and he is the king of this bitch. All his students are his prisoners and his slaves. Let's move on to the basic gist of how this game works, so that we're not explaining the story by every little palace one by one, shall we? The idea from the start is that you want to change the heart of someone in a higher position who is causing harm unto those around you, whether that be your friends or to society. Not only that, but each of the targets represents a sin. Your first target, as I mentioned, is the king of lust, Kamoshida. Like I mentioned, he's a terrible person who is going around beating up his students, one of which is Shiro, An's best friend, because of the hurt and pain caused by Kamoshida, and how she's unable to say or do anything about it, as Kamoshida holds so much to the school that they will cover up anything he does. She attempts to kill herself. This sets off Ryoji and he confronts Kamoshida, who threatens to have you expelled for daring to speak out against him. Once you send the calling card, beat him, and steal the treasure, he has a change of heart in real life. Your next target, Madarame, is the representation of vanity. He's an artist who steals the art of his pupils and claims it as his own. His current pupil is your soon-to-be new companion, Yusuke. Shadow Madarame confesses to not only having stolen the art pieces of his pupils, but to having stolen Sayuri, the art piece in which he is well known for. He didn't just steal it from one of his pupils, but from Yusuke's mother, and watched her die as he did so. Makoto introduces you to your next target, Junya Kaneshiro. He represents the sin of gluttony. He's a mafia boss who uses blackmail and drugs to rise high above all else in the criminal world, as well as using the metaverse, which is something that we will learn later on. He is tied to the conspiracy, which allows him to get away with not being arrested or investigated on. The money he receives from his drug trafficking helps him to fund Shiro's campaign. This is something that is mentioned later on. But there's not much else interesting about his character, so... However, something interesting, same as Madarame, is that upon defeating him, he mentions someone in a black mask was in his palace before you all. This will be explained later, sort of. Futaba is a completely different story. She also doesn't necessarily represent a sin. Instead of trying to change someone's heart in order to save society or someone else, you're trying to get a change of heart to help specifically Futaba. For years, she's been lying to herself, ignoring the truth and believing what the people who killed her mother told her. She believes that she is responsible for her mother's death, feels like she's an absolute letdown, feeling like everyone knows about it and blames her for it, and this causes her to shut down and trap herself in a room. The boss of her palace isn't even her, it's her mother who represents wrath. This version of her mother is how Futaba viewed her based off of a letter that was supposedly left behind after she died. Spoilers, it wasn't actually written by her mother, but by the people who killed her. Speaking of which, who did kill her, and why? There's something important that happens after this, and before the next big target. After the whole Kaneshiro and Futaba Palace, you go to Hawaii for your next school trip. After everything in Hawaii is done, you're given a cutscene where the principal of your school has a mental shutdown, and he's hit by a truck. Turns out that he was part of something known as the conspiracy, which I will bring up later, or actually explain later. And his death was meant to be framed on the Phantom Thieves. The reason he was assassinated was because he was planning on exposing the conspiracy, or exposing Shiro. Kunikazu Okumura, your next target, is the president of Okumura Foods, and he founded Big Bang Burger. He represents the deadly sin of greed. Upon beating him, you see a man in a black outfit, the one mentioned by Kaneshiro and Madarame. For the next couple of days until he confesses, Haru, his daughter, and your companion will update you on how he is, telling you that he has locked himself in his study and refuses to leave. So you're growing a little suspicious, but you, the player, already witnessed his murder, so you know what's up. When he finally comes out and confesses, faith in the Phantom Thieves drops and you don't know what to do, but you know someone framed you, and you need to figure out who it is. Goro Akechi tells you that he knows you all are the Phantom Thieves, and that if you don't help him in changing the heart of Sainijima, he'll turn you in. Now you're catching up to where you started the game. After playing casino games, beating Shadow Sai, and stealing her treasure, the cops arrive and turns out you were ratted out by someone. You've been wondering since the start of the game who it could possibly be, and let's be honest, now that you're here, you know exactly who it is. To spare the long explanation, you trick Goro Akechi into killing the cognitive you instead of the real you, all to prove that he's a traitor. Understand that even after it happens, and you have some of it explained to you, you're still going to be slightly confused, and you're probably not going to really care afterwards. Why? Because after that, you have to figure out who it is that's ordering Akechi to do all this shit. And almost immediately you figure out who it is. Masayoshi Shiro. You don't know what he sounds like or what he looks like, you just know the name. Sojiro tells you that Futaba's mother actually knew Masayoshi Shiro, and that she brought up his name before she died. Futaba's mother researched cognitive science, which is the study of how the cognitive worlds you're in, or palaces, works. Yeah, that's really not hard to get. Anyways, Shiro killed her, and she knew he was going to do so she told Sojiro about it. The reason that he wanted to kill her was because of the fact that she knew way too much about the cognitive world. And now that she basically gave him all that she needs, and now that he has Goro Akechi, he really didn't need her. Later you figure out that Shiro is the asshole on the megaphone running for prime minister or something. Well, when you meet him in person, you realize he's also the same person who fucked you over and is the reason you're here and seen as a delinquent by everyone. But that's fine, because now you're gonna beat his ass in the cognitive world. All goes well, you beat him, and even though he tries to temporarily kill himself to kill you, it fails and you all escape. What else? Alright, turns out there's an evil god backing him called doesn't matter, he's a corrupt god. And because of that, everyone in Japan views Shiro as having done nothing wrong. But hey, fuck you evil guy, we're gonna delete mementos. Well, too bad, because now mementos and the world are one. Nobody can see it, and nobody remembers you. So you all vanish into thin air, never to be seen, never to be remembered. But you're not entirely gone, because you wake up in your cognitive form in the Velvet Room. Igor orders the twins to kill you. They kind of hesitate, and then they kill themselves to become one. Alice, the persona who comes from the merging of the twins, tells you that now she is free, and so is her master. The real Igor. The one that you see is a fake. He admits it. Turns out that he's the evil god you tried to defeat earlier. When you beat him in his Holy Grail form, he turns into the god of control, which turns out to be too much for you without the support of all the people who had forgotten about you. But as the people come to, they all, one by one, begin to cheer you on until the entire society is joining in. This, in turn, brings forth the power of Satania, the leader of the demons. You defeat the corrupt god and Mementos disappears for good. The end. Obviously, I really wanted to cut that down as fast as possible. The story is really good in my opinion, and the theme that follows it as well. The game follows a theme of breaking free from the chains of society, trying not to be a slave to the corrupt leaders of it, attempting to liberate anyone who doesn't feel contempt with their boring lives. I also love that each of the bosses or palaces is represented by a sin, and that society as a whole is represented by sloth. This is something that I cannot deny as being true for society today, something we truly live in. Speaking of which, the way that they chose to symbolize the Gnostic within the game is fairly, for lack of a better word, interesting. From the 7 deadly sins that the main bosses are loosely based off of, to the false ruler god.
Yaldabaoth.
I cannot pronounce that name for the life of me, as well as Sataniel being the one to teach humanity to rebel against him and his 7 deadly sins, thus defeating him. It has a really nice setup with things that you don't really need to be paying close attention to, but if you do, you get a hint of things a little early. For instance, I don't remember whatsoever the pancake conversation, but had I noticed it at first, I probably would have been a little more suspicious of Akechi. That's just one of the many things I absolutely adore about the game's story. I don't really have much of a problem with the story as it is. The flaws mainly lie in other areas. One of the many things about the story I enjoy is the idea it follows. Kids with powers rebelling against adults who are corrupt, corrupting the system, or are just overall unnecessarily evil. But it goes beyond that. Someone who is a part of that corrupt system has similar powers, using it to kill anyone who stands in his way, and in doing so, frames you for murder. God, there's so much you piece together during the 7th Palace, it pieces really just about everything, every single question that you had. I was initially confused for a while as to why in the world Okumura was assassinated, other than to set the thieves up for failure. But then I learned it was because his scandals were becoming too much for the media to cover up, and his donations weren't enough to constantly be able to cover it up. The person who tells you this is the TV station president, or at least the shadow version of him, someone who has close ties to Shiro. On this same subject, after you beat Kaneshiro, he tells you he was visited by a black masked figure. My question is, why couldn't Akechi just frame us then and there for the death of Kaneshiro? Too easy? Too soon? Not enough of a reason to get rid of him? I mean, I guess that makes sense. The Phantom Thieves weren't nearly as popular as they were during Okumura's palace. Still, they were getting ready to take out someone who was a big help to Shiro, and having him have a change of heart could mean exposing Shiro. We're told that Kaneshiro was part of the conspiracy, a group of corrupt people that controlled Tokyo from the depths of Metaverse, and that all his money from drug trafficking helped fund Shiro's organization. So I can see why they wouldn't want to assassinate him. But why was Akechi there in the first place then? Was it just to tell us? Who knows, it really isn't explained at all. But they killed not only Akumura, but the principal of Shujin, all because once they had a change of heart, it was very likely that they would expose all of Shiro's lies, his scandals, and the conspiracy as a whole. Whatever. When you do change his heart, that doesn't happen, but he does turn himself in. Turns out even Madarame was part of the conspiracy, and was helping to fund Shiro's campaign. He was also visited and left alone, yet when he had a change of heart, he definitely could have given up a lot of things, but he didn't. These are just tiny things, I guess. Maybe they weren't really that big of threats. One of my favorite things before we move on is that, unlike most of the other palaces, if you don't finish Kamoshida's palace in the time allotted, you will be brought back to the interrogation room where you will be assassinated by Akechi. Moving on. Alright, this game totally doesn't suffer in character development. In fact, it has a very strong character development in just about every character. What I really like the most about the game is its decision to really push a waifu war by not making a canon waifu. Come on, you had to expect me to bring this up in a Persona video. I mean, this is the main reason you buy the game, right? Unless you're just one of those people who genuinely enjoys JRPGs. Moving on. You have your main protagonist, a student who was expelled from his other school for having gotten involved in a dispute, resulting in someone getting injured and him getting probation. Obviously, because of this, his entire personality shifts to a depressive, quiet one, even after meeting Ryoji. It takes up until he awakens his true persona that he decides to help, because now his true self is awake. There isn't necessarily a canon name for him, just names that have been given to him through the manga and anime adaptations. So we're going to refer to him under the best name in my opinion, Akira, instead of based our guy like Ryoji refers to him as. Akira is a bit of a cocky, snarky kid who has the guts to say shit even when his life is in danger. That being said, he has a high code of honor and justice with a flair for the dramatic. He's quite the character that gains respect from everyone, including the main antagonist, a fucking corrupt god. He holds his companions and the world around him above all else, and he will do anything to ensure the safety of them, going as far as to, as I mentioned, defeat a corrupt god, as if they had much of a choice in the matter. Clearly, it's not just Akira alone. His teammates as well share the same level of justice and are just as smart, if not smarter. The biggest reveal of just how smart this group is when they work together is when they intentionally get caught and make Akechi believe that he had killed Akira. When I initially played that through, my mind was fucking exploding. It was, for a brainless such as myself, a 200 IQ play. One of the characters that I see getting shit on by almost everyone on PG and the Persona 5 subreddit is Mishima. To me, Mishima isn't a bad character. He definitely has the ability to turn us in at any time, much like some of the other characters, but chooses not to because he's such a huge fan. He creates a fan site for the Phantom Thieves, one that garners a lot of attention and bears a lot of importance to the story. You see it in the bottom right corner after it becomes a thing, and gradually you see the percentage of people go up and down. Obviously, with having created something like that with as much attention as it has, it's going to cause the creator to go through some form of self-righteousness. He feels he can use it to get back at people who have bullied him, gain more popularity for himself, and he even uses it as a means to silence people who are talking bad about the Phantom Thieves. This creates a shadow of himself in the metaverse. It's actually one of my favorite and least favorite things about his character. Most of the confidence you do will have you go to mementos to change someone's heart to further your relationship with that person. With Mishima, it's himself, his repressed feelings, his distorted desires, with the website that he created. It's something I definitely would have liked to have seen happen to one of the Phantom Thieves. Hell, I mean, you have Ryoji, who clearly wants to do some of this for his own benefit, or at least that's how he makes himself seem. I would have liked to have seen him in a shadow form, but Mishima works too. And this can easily segue into Futaba. She requests that you save her from herself, or change her heart because she doesn't want to continue feeling like a letdown, or someone who is useless and a waste of fresh air. While this isn't incorrect, filthy neat, it's also her distorted view of the world around her. Like I mentioned prior, in her palace, you're shown the past that she has had. Her mother died, supposedly killing herself by throwing herself in front of a car. Later we learn that some men in suits came by to read a letter left by her mother. These letters make her mother out to be someone who absolutely hated Futaba. It's saddening to hear, but it's entirely false and made up. And she has this realization from her shadow self, which is something that I find interesting. Her shadow self is the more self-aware, less of a distortion, more of what her reality should be. In other words, her shadow self is her true self, the self she has repressed with lies about her mother and those around her. You see that at the end of her palace. Next up is Makoto, who is definitely my favorite waifu. She's a student council president. She's smart and she cares a lot about her grades. Like, a lot. I don't want to study, damn it. I already have max knowledge. She really just wants to help out her sister and not feel completely useless to society. Much like Morgana. But we'll get into that later. In the beginning of the game, she will tail you for a while, and you can spot her from time to time doing so. It's actually quite funny. Clearly, much like myself, she isn't the brightest when it comes to social norms, and how you're supposed to act around people. Her entire confidant is her sticking her nose in her friend's business, but let's be honest, it's almost like she's looking out for her in a very positive way. She's going out of her way to help her friend Aiko see that she's being lied to and deceived by a very terrible person. This kind of portrays her character as nosy but caring, which is exactly what she is. Which is kind of annoying, but at least she does good. Also, her fucking farewell present is a calculator of all things. That being said, she does give you a wristwatch on Christmas, both of which are really useful things in New Game Plus, if you can be fucked to play that game for another 70 hours. Which I mean, I can, it's a really good game. Haru Okumura is a completely pointless character, only brought in to have someone help you with Okumura's palace. Changed my mind. Don't get me wrong, it's quite interesting to see her go from someone who is shy and keeps to themselves to being eccentric, rebellious, a member of the Phantom Thieves. You could even say that she's one. Kinda forgot about her, and she doesn't really add much to the group aside from her massive forehead and wealth. Her entire confidant is just helping her to become more involved in her dad's business. There's really nothing special about her. If you think there's more to her, just go ahead and tell me in the comments, but I will 100% stick to what I just said. Anyways, it's time to talk about Ryoji. Alright, I've already shit-talked to Ryoji enough, so I guess it's time to give him some praise. Ryoji is a loud-mouthed idiot who clearly wants to be a phantom thief more for the fame and bitches than anything else. Or at least that's how he makes himself out to be. But when you're all about to be swallowed alive by Shiro's Titanic moment, he swoops in to sacrifice himself for the team. It's pretty clear he cares for his family and his teammates. He hates himself for messing up the efforts he's made to make things easier for his mother. He truly is a caring and a loving person underneath his loud, uncaring, ignorant behavior. You know, the same behavior that caused Makoto to learn that we're all the Phantom Thieves. That being said, it was also On's fault. Anyways, going back to how he's caring, when you learn that the risk of changing Kamoshida's heart is that it might kill him, he's almost reluctant to do it, as if all the hurt and pain that he has caused onto others isn't enough to justify killing him. That is up until he witnesses Shiho attempt to kill herself. He even goes as far as to finally confront Kamoshida, calling him out on what he did. This also brings forward another character for the same reason, Aunt Kaimuki. An has even more of a reason to take down Kamoshida over all the other characters. Not only was Shiho practically her friend, but she also was forced to have sexual relations with Kamoshida in order to help Shiho out with her placement in volleyball. Rumors are spread throughout the entire school about her and how she's sleeping with Kamoshida because she loves him, which leads her to become an outcast. It's just saddening to see. You start to feel bad for An. After Shiho attempts suicide, An accompanies you in taking down Kamoshida. Although you and Ryoji turn her down at first, she kind of ends up joining anyways, by wandering back into the palace. Her goal from the beginning until the end was to make sure she is never abused or used again, to never be a slave to anyone no matter what. Her confidant is all around an attempt to make her a better and stronger person. At first she has no clue what she's doing, but she tries her hardest. By the end of her confidant, you see her finally stand up for herself, against her rival model, who ends up gaining respect for her in that moment, enough to finally take her seriously. It's something that more people should take note from, especially those who would much rather keep quiet and shut down when they have a problem with someone. Next up is Yusuke, probably one of my favorite characters, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna have to cut down the summarization of him. When you first meet Yusuke, he's a bit of a weird one. He's clearly obsessed with the thickness and beauty of On. He's a very artistic and outgoing person. He sees any and every opportunity as one to greatly advance his artistic abilities. He's very passionate about his teacher Madarame and gets angry when you and Ryoji dare to speak out against him. Even after he knows the truth surrounding Madarame about the stolen paintings, he refuses to accept it all so that way he can keep a place to live, and so he can have a destined future. However, when he finally learns that Madarame is responsible for the death of his mother, you can see a shift in Yusuke's personality. Almost. Not by much, as he's still on a different wavelength than other people, but you can see him finally speak out against the abuse and the rumors about Madarame. It's funny that, despite clearly being rather artistic, he's by far one of the most adult and level-headed of the Phantom Thieves. His confidant isn't really much aside from seeing him go from struggling with art after the fallout with Madarame to him regaining his understanding of it, being able to create a masterpiece centered around mementos and the twisted desire of man. Next up is Morgana. He's actually one of the more important characters of the game. Throughout a good chunk of the game, he practically has no recollection of his past, where he came from or who exactly he is. When you first are introduced to him, his personality is a bit arrogant and condescending, more towards Ryoji than anyone else. He does, in combat, tend to act cocky and better than you, until he figures out you have the power to catch the hearts of the personas you fight and can gain them as your own. That being said, he seems to really respect and love On, almost creepily in some of the things he says. It's almost comical how often Morgana attempts to seem more manly than he is, absolutely hating it when people call him a cat, despite how much he acts like one. I mean, because he is one. At one point, Morgana is fed up with the treatment he's receiving from everyone in the group, and he decides to leave, saying how he can take a Kumara all on his own, and then he gets his ass handed to him almost immediately. But then Haru is brought into the game, and even then he's still useless, and so is she. I seriously don't see the problem everyone has with Morgana. Sure, he forces you to go to sleep when you just want to do your confidants, but you do that yourself, even when he's gone. Yes, when he leaves, it is completely childish and uncalled for, and just adds an unnecessary feud, but that shit disappears in like a few days, and it really didn't even matter to the story. But this is about his character, not about the story. After defeating the main villain of the game, you see the entire metaverse disappear, and with that, you see Morgana disappear as well. His final words and his disappearance altogether kinda made me tear up a little, as that stupid little smile floats up, fading off. Even though I kind of hated Morgana, it really made you sad because he was really a big part of the group, and in the end it turned out he was a bigger part of the metaverse. You went through so much with Morgana, defeated a perverted, abusive teacher, took down an art thief, helped a hopeless and defeated NEET come to her senses, took down a drug lord, a company owner abusive to his workers, did something in Sai's palace, I really don't know what, took down a heavily corrupt prime minister, and even defeated a god. As I stated, it's his final words from the treasure to the cutscene that hit close. He was able to be useful to those he admired. He didn't back down. The whole universe is just a product of cognition. It can be freely remade, and so can the people within it. There's no such thing as the real world. What we see and feel is what shapes reality around us. It gives our short lives infinite potential. So long as we can stay strong and power through the darkness, the world within us will never end. The Velvet Room is a tradition amongst the Persona games, one that mainly serves to be where you fuse personas or level them up. However, in this one, it has another purpose, and that's to house the main antagonist. Sure, he's also held within Mementos, the training grounds and final palace, but he's also taken possession of Igor, who takes control of the Velvet Room. This part is going to be real short and sweet, so don't expect much from it. Inside the Velvet Room, you can fuse personas from other personas. You can fuse a group of personas to create a powerful persona. You can kill off personas for items and skill cards, and you can even put your personas in lockdown so that they can level up. However, in order to get locked down, you have to level up the Strength Arcana to the 3rd rank. The first time I played, I kind of unintentionally unlocked the lockdown. Had I known that furthering the Confidant of the twins would allow me to pay to create high-level personas, I probably would have spent hours doing their requests. The game tells you that you can do this, but I'm just an idiot. This brings me to a very important part of the game, the Confidants. Yes, you have a total of 21 Confidants, however, 17 of them you have the option to complete, which strikes the debate of who is the best Confidant to complete the fastest, especially in the 8 waifus you have. If you ask me, it's Takemi, as she will take half off on her prices, which is very much useful when you want to buy an SP Adhesive 3, which is a very, very useful item. She also sells resurrection items, but those were so expensive I couldn't even afford one at half off. Then again, I did just buy 6 or 7 SP adhesives, so I was pretty poor. Kawakami is also insanely useful, because you can request a special massage that allows you to say fuck you to Morgana and go out at night. But that's only useful if you haven't already gone really far into people's confidants or maxed out your social stats. Speaking of which, I had the hardest time balancing confidants and maxing out my social stats, and I needed max charm to do Makoto's confidant and max knowledge to progress in Hifumi's. It was bullshit. Speaking of which, Hifumi is also a really useful confidant, allowing you to swap out party members with other party members during anyone's turn, which was especially useful when taking on Shiro and the final boss. Shinya Oda is another useful confidant, especially Downshot in the Oda special. I wouldn't know if it's useful during the final boss, because I didn't get to max out his confidant by that time. One of my main problems with the game lies there, but it's one that makes sense. I wish your level of charm or kindness affects how many points come out of your answers, especially because I don't want to have to waste time hanging out with them, just to have to go back and do them again and rank up finally. But apparently if you have a persona of the Arcana you are trying to max out, you will be able to get more points from doing that, which I didn't know for the longest time. I wish I would have known that, especially because during one of the last palaces, you're given a lot of time to finally finish up your confidants, as you will not be able to have any other time afterwards to do so. And had I known that if I just had one of my personas equipped, I would have been able to do things a lot faster, I would have done so. And I have absolutely no clue if the game tells you that or not. But hey, I think it's really cool that there are a lot of things in the game that you kind of learn yourself the more you play. I brought up social stats, so I guess it's best that we go back over them. You have 5 stats that you can level up throughout the game: knowledge, charm, kindness, guts, and proficiency. Knowledge kind of builds up over time, but if you want to max that shit out, you're going to want to study, read books, watch movies, play games, sleep in class, do confidants that give you knowledge, and once again, study. Really, all you really want knowledge for is for opening up Togo's and Makoto's confidants. Kindness, proficiency, guts, and charm can be maxed out by working at places, but trying to work at all 3 places and being able to do your confidants, you really can't do it. In fact, I really didn't take any time out to do the job that I was given, which was at the beef bowl shop. I kind of treated it like my real job. I guess for closing, we should bring up the gameplay system. It just works. It flows so nicely, and I don't really have much of a problem with it. I do get upset from time to time with the RNG bullshit and Futaba not being as useful as she should be. Where the fuck are the buffs? I'm not really that big of a fan of turn-based combat. That's why I haven't played any of the Final Fantasy games. Okay, that is a lie, I have played some of the Final Fantasy games. But there's something about this system I like. Once you find out a persona's weakness, you can exploit it to your advantage, using it to either capture them or take money/items. Sure, the XP you can sometimes gain is a little bit lackluster, but if you do Mishima's Confidant, you can gain a lot more XP from battles, even in merciless difficulty. There's really not much to say negatively about it. Sure, the system might be too easy for some. Just knock out an enemy and then talk to them, leave, easy peasy. And I mean, sometimes that's nice if you just want to speed through to the boss, especially on New Game Plus, and especially because a lot of those bosses are fucking hard. Maybe because I was on Merciless. I really see no problem with it. But I guess I'm just a fucking brainlet. To conclude this retrospective, Persona 5 has become probably one of my favorite games of all time. I don't mind devoting so much of my time to just playing Persona mindlessly, reliving the story and spending the better part of a week writing a script for an in-depth look at it. Sure, I really didn't focus on speaking about my experience with the game, as I'm pretty sure my experience is a bit too linear and something that I feel a lot of people can see as being too dull. Really, my second time around playing the game, I've just focused on reading the story and sticking to it. The first time around, I just blew through the game. I really didn't care about the story, and I made sure that I was grinding and taking care of my confidants. And now, with my third time around playing the game, I'm starting to learn a lot more about the game, and I'm kind of focusing on learning more of the weaknesses that you can exploit and trying to 100% the game, which is something I only recently started doing as I started seeing a lot of Persona 5 videos pop up on my feed and realizing that there are a lot of things I didn't know about the game. And that's probably why I like the game the most, is that everyone who plays this game is going to have a different experience no matter what. Even if it's a linear as hell story, the most I can say that it's different is the confidants. And not only the confidants, but how you go through a palace. Sure, most people are going to be like, hey, you know, I had trouble with this palace because of this reason. Someone else is going to be like, yo, I had that exact same problem. But then you're also going to have other people who are like, I didn't really have that problem at all. Because some people just manage to figure out the game pretty easily and exploit a lot of things. I remember one of my friends telling me how much of a problem he had with Futaba's palace, wherein I managed to finish it in about a day. Game time, not real time. And I think it took him about maybe 3 or 4 days game time. But that's the thing. It's truly captivating and a interesting experience, to say the least. Sure, many RPGs out there and many JRPGs do the exact same thing, but I don't really think I've been able to find one that I have actually enjoyed and loved the story of. Like I said, I love the story of this game and the idea of being able to stand up to the corrupt adults who are fucking things up for the rest of society and saving the sheeple who blindly follow the adults because they feel like they can't do anything about it. The ending is fucking amazing, taking on a corrupt god and saving the world before Christmas, as well as the symbolism within that ending. Regardless, the ending with everyone going on a trip together is a really nice ending, and it brings me to another point that I forgot about, but I felt belonged here. Production IG did a wonderful job with the anime cutscenes. It makes me sad that they didn't go on to do the animated series. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but, you know, it would have been nice. Overall, the game made me want to play the other Persona games, but as I don't have a PSP or PS Vita, I won't be doing that for quite some time. So if you want to help me in that effort, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Sorry, I didn't know how to end this shit, so sign Nijima's best waifu. Thank you for sitting through half an hour of absolute fucking autism. Not quite sure I will be doing anything quite like this, as it took a lot of time to put together a script, but I digress. If it does turn out really well, then maybe I'll try and do something in the future, because I actually enjoyed working on this project and I hope that everyone else enjoys it as well. This really doesn't mean much for the route that I'm going with my channel, it's just that, you know, I felt like doing this. And I mean, now that I'm making a lot of solo content, kinda gotta get better at making commentaries and shit.